Hi darlings, and welcome to my channel. Today I want to take a deep, but not so deep dive into why groups like VCHA might work in the Western market. I'm making this video because I'm not down for everyone predicting people's downfall, especially children. They have a point, but they can just state it without saying they aren't going to be successful. Let's start at the top. The age of K-pop entering the US began in the 1950s. This was also the beginning of K-pop as a genre before it went on to become its own music industry. The Kim sisters, a trio and the first ever K-pop act, saw fame in the US, despite not being English speakers. They were the first K-pop act to ever appear on shows and the first ever to have a song on the US Billboard. They achieved this fame by performing renditions of American pop songs in their mother tongue, that is, Korean. The Kim sisters would later become the foundation on which K-pop would be built. StayC and the Boys, created in the 1990s, would become the first ever K-pop group. The fandoms and K-music that we see today would be born because of them. By merging Korean pop music with American pop music, they set part of the blueprint that would later form the first generation of K-pop. The 90s to the 2000s. You could say this is when companies discovered the rough sketch of what would become the perfect idol formula. This ushered in the age of Hot, the group that would go on to claim being the first true idol group. While the Western audience, to an extent, were now aware of K-pop, it had yet to give to K-pop something that companies would later kill for: its money and its overbearing consumption. SHinee, debuting in 2001, TVXQ in 2003, Super Junior in 2005, and Big Bang in 2006. While the aforementioned artists saw massive growth and truly alerted the Western audience that something was happening in Korea, a new age of music, if you would call it that, none really saw the impact of having a global audience like the phenomenon and cultural reset that was Big Bang. Big Bang would be the first K-pop group to ever see a massive fandom, selling out power, and would be the first group to see, quote-unquote, a breakthrough in the US. Before, the US audience was simply aware that K-pop existed, but now they bought into it. Big Bang was also the first group to have light sticks, invented by the name, who would go on to be titled the King of K-pop, G-Dragon. YG at this time became the first company to mass-produce the light stick and became the first company to really feel the power of having a global audience. But no generation would really see the need or feel the desire to enter the Western market like the third generation. They saw its potential. They saw the cash cow that the West was and still is. Enter the two biggest groups in the world, as they would later be named, BTS and Blackpink. But even with the boom and popularity of Blackpink and BTS, the K-pop companies hadn't yet discovered the gem that would later become a trend of releasing English songs, something that would also become a marketing strategy to gather favor in the West and build fandom power, thereby ensuring the group would make more money. No group had really tapped that. That is, until the phenomenon that would be called Monsta X, becoming the first ever K-pop group to release a full English album. This release did not just open a gateway for an increase in popularity and fandom power, but would later become the answer to every K-pop company's question: how do we cement ourselves into the Western market? Everybody and their mothers started testing out this marketing strategy. Yes, people, Monsta X began a movement. BTS, having already gained momentum globally, finally tested out this strategy in 2020 during the pandemic. K-pop had not seen a growth like the one that came after the release of Permission to Dance by BTS. Everybody, or at least the majority of people around the globe, knew or had an idea about the industry that had become K-pop. Every single group saw a massive increase in popularity. From new groups to the biggest groups, people wanted to explore K-pop, and they most certainly did. K-pop companies now had a global audience waiting at the ready to give their money and their time to watch these practically factory-produced idols do everything, be perfect at everything in a way they could only dream about. This then ushered in the debate of why K-pop saw such a big rise. Was it really the music? Or was it the selling of parasocial relationships with celebrities? That never was in the West. Between 1920 and 1936, the U.S. saw a compulsory rise of education for the quote-unquote youth. It was during this time period that the age of the teenager was mostly defined, but it didn't quite stick till later on. It was also during this period that America would see its first ever teen idol, Roger Wolf Kahn, who would eventually be dubbed as the Millionaire Maestro. Before the 1900s, teenagers never really had much to quote-unquote contribute to society. They were mainly used for child labor, but even the owners of the companies didn't want them. They were too out of control, hence the reason they were sent to the institution we now know as high school. But even that wouldn't stop the illegal activities these youngsters would divulge in. The introduction of teen idols, however, gave the youngsters people their age they could look up to, people they could fawn over. Hollywood, being the money-hungry industry it is, saw this and took full advantage of it. Fast track to the movement whose name we now know as the Beatles, the group that would eventually usher in a new age of teen culture in Hollywood and would become the blueprint for the teen idol. The Hollywood industry had never seen a shake like the age of the Beatles before. Teen culture was on the rise. The movie industry took initiative, and soon we saw the increase in the tween industry as well. Teens and tweens were identified a certain way. They dressed a certain way. Enter the age of icons and then teen idols, like Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, and Big Time Rush, just to name a few. Teen culture saw what you would call a tilt or a shift. You could say it saw the age of the liberation of teenagers. Crazier scandals, sex culture, less clothing. Tween culture was dying and shifting from child to teen to adult. But nothing could have prepared the world for what the age of social media would do. The beginning of the goodbye to Disney or La La Land. The death of Hannah Montana ushered the before alter ego of Miley Cyrus. The change was drastic, and so was the change in the mindsets of the youth. The adult culture was no longer out of reach or so far away. They could do the things that adults could and get away with it in public, and people would praise them or fight for them. Enter 2020. Before I continue, I just wanted to say that teens were never really clean, from underage drinking, smoking, or doing drugs to having sex. Teens have never been clean. But at least half the population of teens and tweens didn't have the audacity to outrightly do these acts, without fear of consequences. 2020 didn't just bring a pandemic upon the human race, it ushered in the worst age of social media use yet. The shorter attention span and the disappearance of the teen era began. While the teen era had slowly been on the decline, 2020 saw the emergence of the it girl and it boy culture, and everybody wanted a piece of the pie. Teens were also consuming the constant content being churned out during that period, and they wanted to be like that too. They wanted to be like celebrity kids too. They wanted to dress sexy, get their nails done, impress the opposite gender. And the rise of Gen Z parents allowed this. With the Gen Z, the ultimate not giving a shit generation, becoming parents, this was bound to happen sooner or later. With parents enabling this culture, the likes of Piper Raquel and Brooklyn Queen from 2016 and 2017 respectively saw a boom in popularity as well. Catering to this young audience, children's music and clothing practically faded into the background. Now in 2023, we can safely say that teen culture has died. The US is feeding off of teenagers who are trying to become adults as fast as possible and is catering very well to this newfound audience. Teenagers in the West rarely take joy from nice, subtle, Disney-like music and will party their hearts out while divulging in every adult-type activity you can think of, so far as they have access to it. Because of the death or decline of teen culture, teen idols or teen music has died. Vulgar music and mass-producing movies with sexual liberation for teens is the latest toy of Hollywood or the West in total. So let's recap. Number 1. The West doesn't have a market for the global groups that K-pop is trying to sell to them because of the disappearance of the tween or teen culture. And most Western adults will most likely not sit down to watch groups like VCHA. In other words, there is no market for global groups in the West. Number 2. To answer the question of the debate of where people like K-pop for its music or its parasocial relationship, the answer is people want the both, some more than others. But if you ask a 100 K-pop fans, 10 will tell you that they like it because it's less vulgar than Western music. The small number is because I'm trying not to exaggerate here. Now, contrary to popular belief, K-pop is most definitely not clean. It's never been. Aside its scandals and controversies or politics, K-pop music with its many sexual innuendos or their suggestive choreographies are not clean by a mile. But what the people who choose this option see as clean is the very clear lack of curse words or foul language. Of course, Groups without either sexual innuendos or suggestive choreographies definitely exist in K-pop, like StayC for instance. But you get my point. Now, the thing with a world as fast evolving as ours is that it's fairly easy or possible to restart a movement or breathe life into a dying culture, especially with the age of the internet. Teen culture is not necessarily dead and impossible to bring back, and with the popularity of K-pop in the West, it's possible. Which brings me to my next point about the ideation of global groups. We already saw the impact that K-pop had when they were able to reach a global audience by releasing music in those various languages. Which begs the question, what if we brought it closer to them? What if we made K-pop for them and not for the Korean audience? Imagine a group, trained with the Korean system, but from the homeland of our target audience, releasing K-pop type music with K-pop type performances but in the language of their homeland. AKA, the global group, or what they call the global group but is mainly targeted at the US for now. Thus the birth of groups like XG, VCHA and Dream Academy, which is still currently in marination. I'm not gonna lie, the idea is good, it makes sense, but with how monopolized the West is by its industry, beauty and entertainment alike, pulling that feat would be without a doubt tough. There is almost no market for it, but it's possible for this new K-pop strategy to somehow help restart the teen idol culture. Their best bet would be consistency and marketing towards teenagers around the same age with these kids. If they keep going and JYP doesn't pull some silly and no reverse card on them, they'll eventually find their people and their place. K-pop is already popular in the West. All they need to do is ride off the back of that fame and market more in the US than Korea. Or else, they'd just be a K-pop group with non-Korean members. Parents and a few youths are trying to fight back at the quote-unquote vulgarity that is helping to destroy the US. So in all honesty, VCHA might just kick out and work. But a big chunk of whether or not they luck out would depend on JYP Entertainment and how they handle this group. So there you have it, guys. Whether or not the group will succeed depends on luck and marketing. That's the reason for this longest video. I'm sorry if it's too long. I kinda just really wanted to fully explain from both ends, the West and Korea, and then finally explain why they may or may not play into the favor of these global groups. Well, that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm no historian or history geek, so this was relatively hard. It's not a video essay and was not professionally scripted or edited or whatever. I was airing out what was on my mind. So if it's not totally accurate, I'm sorry, but I tried my very best to ensure its accuracy and effectiveness at delivery my point. Bye for now, my darlings.